Welcome to episode 2 of JUNGS AI. Today on the podcast, we have a guest, Merelda Wu, co-founder and CEO of Melio AI, an MLOps consultancy based in Johannesburg. She holds BSc and MSc degrees in electrical engineering from the University of the Witwatersrand. Born in Taiwan, she moved to South Africa at the age of 17. Merelda has over 9 years of experience in data science, data engineering, and analytics, working across sectors such as banking, insurance, and healthcare. She is an MLOps evangelist, focused on accelerating the data science project lifecycle to deliver business value. She also co-organizes the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Stay tuned to episode 2.
You're my guest in JUNGS AI. Just to let you know that JUNGS AI is just going to be a normal conversation, learning more about you, what you do in the industry, and also any interesting stuff that we should also understand, because part of JUNGS AI's mission, we're building a AI machine learning hackathon. So far, we did our first workshop last week, Saturday, and that was a good participant from the university, from TUT, UP, so there were members around there, so that was exciting. But overall, we just want to get as much insights from you, and hopefully the guys will be listening. Youth, that's the target that we're trying to aim for, would be motivated to come into this particular space.
Awesome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So what inspired you to be a founder of Melio AI? And what is the differentiating part about it compared to any other AI consulting firm?
So when I started my first job as a data scientist, the field is still quite nascent, at least in South Africa. And back then, I find myself building a lot of models. It was super fun for me, like going through the math and write the code and seeing how the models are built. But there was always a really big challenge from models going from being built by data scientists into going into production, being used by people and having real impact to the people's lives. And that problem, I think I've seen it at quite a lot of companies. And I started discussing this with Harry, he's my co-founder, and a lot is centered around engineering challenges, because back then I was still quite young, mostly focused on just the model building and deployment part. And he was saying that, hey, a lot of these problems have actually been solved by DevOps. And why are we still like experiencing these challenges in a data space? So I think that's part of the big motivation of why we started Melio, is that I don't want to just build models and then put them on a shelf and nobody uses it. So in the beginning of Melio, our mission was to make the last mile deployment a lot easier for AI and machine learning projects, and almost help the data scientists to get over the hurdle of productionizing the models. And back then, I think it was quite naive that we can tackle this complicated challenge. It's actually not just engineering. So yeah, that's kind of how we got started. And I think what makes us different from other AI consulting firms, both of us are engineering background. So we study electrical engineering and all of our career is in software and data. So a little bit different from maybe more like the big management consulting companies, where they're more focused on frameworks, and other development shops that's more focused on like building stuff. We try to almost be a little wedge in the middle, where we help design more sustainable end-to-end solutions, but at the same time really have the technical experience to back it up. So one thing that I think we focus quite a lot is, because I was working at consulting companies before and helping customers, a lot of the times is around like, how do we get quick wins? And from an engineering perspective, a lot of the times quick wins create technical debt. And that was also a big challenge that we tried to solve at Melio. Yeah.
No, definitely. Because I know a lot of companies, when they embark in ML or even AI initiatives or POCs, a lot of times they have probably a big roadmap to where they want to be. But sometimes it seems like the most simplest form or the quickest win would do just enough job to motivate them to do the bigger projects as you go along in the future. So how do you address those problems with your clients again? Because that's also another concern.
Yeah, I think POC to production is a very common pattern in a lot of the enterprises, especially early on in the data science and even now in Gen AI. Is nobody really knows if this use case is going to be successful. So they say, okay, well, we'll dedicated resources for 6, 8, 12 weeks. And then afterwards, when they see that it's going well, then it's like, okay, cool, we need it in production tomorrow. But then there's this whole bit in the middle that just gets skipped, such as engineering, compliance, making sure that the code is like reproducible, reusable, there's monitoring in place, and all of that kind of just gets like shoved in the back because businesses a lot of times don't see the value of that. They only feel the pain afterwards. So but what we try to do is that because we've seen these projects fail a few times, so even when we're building the POCs, we try to put in a lot of good foundations in place. It's not to bloat up the POC and not to extend the timeline, but more just that for POCs that we're quite confident that it will go into production. It's not an R&D project. It's a we've done this, we've seen it successful at other clients. Let's build it well in the first 6, 8, 12 weeks. Maybe we might have to invest a little bit of our own time and capacity to do that, but it'll save us a lot of pain and headache later on.
Interesting. That's really nice. So I'm just going to go back to your personal life. So you came from obviously you're Taiwan and from Taiwan. So you came here in South Africa at age 17. What was like the big culture shock at the time? And what is, if you obviously, I'm not sure if you go back home quite often, because that will also give us more of a how's AI evolving in Taiwan compared to South Africa, if you had that opportunity.
Yeah, so it's been quite a long time since I moved here. I consider myself more South African than Taiwanese these days. But I think the biggest culture shock that I got here was like how much sunshine there is in Taipei, where I came from. I think it's like 250 days out of 365 days are raining.
Oh,
So
wow.
really enjoyed the sunshine. And the people. I think I was also quite shocked that everywhere I go, even at like Woolworths or Pick and Pay or whatever, all the cashiers will ask me how are you? And back then when I was studying English, I was like, this is a thing that, people don't really use, right? It's just, the textbook. How are you? Good, thank you. I am fine. And like we don't really pay attention to it, but then it's actually people are so friendly that you're actually okay to go up to anyone and have a conversation. So I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a South African thing, and you adapted to us, so that's perfect. That's nice to see. So one of the things around AI, we have problems when it comes to AI models, biases. How do you guys handle that, especially coming from a fairness and also accuracy point of view when deploying the solutions for your clients?
So I think fairness and bias is just almost one part of the responsible AI. We're trying to adopt a more holistic, responsible AI approach. That is actually everyone's definition to responsible AI is slightly different, but at least in our mind, it was more around having design from the user's perspective and the engineering perspective, the development and the deployment of the model, the maintenance and upkeeping of the model, and how it fits into compliance, governance, and regulations. So that whole life cycle, I think, is what we try to almost make sure that we keep quite close with. And from the bias and fairness perspective, what we try to do is that in the early on of the machine learning development, one thing that we follow a lot is iterative and incremental development. So initially, when we set up a project, we want to not only include technical metrics, but also more bias and fairness metrics. Those metrics, though, a lot of the times are quite difficult to identify, and we have to work quite closely with the business stakeholders or the users. What is the intention they have for building these models? Whose lives are likely to be impacted? And one thing that I've heard recently is this thing called perspective density. So if you can pack enough perspectives into a single place, then you can hear a lot more alternative perspectives, which means you can design better solutions that are more appropriate and catering for the people that you might impact. So I guess long story short is to include fairness and bias metrics along with your accuracy and latency, those type of technical metrics to make sure that when you're building it, you're acutely aware of what your models are doing, but then also after it being in production, continuously monitor that is still staying consistent. I just got a call.
No worries. Okay, perfect. No, that sounds amazing. So I'm just gonna go back to what's trending at the moment. I think this was probably last week. Studio Ghibli, the dilemma of copyright. I mean, I know in Japan they actually have a law that you can train models utilizing. So it wouldn't be a copyright issue, but when you look at that, what is your opinion, especially looking at the iconic Studio Ghibli? It's something that we grew up watching growing up.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion on that? And could there be a way to improve maybe in copyright, or should there be no copyright going into the future of AI if we're trying to achieve AGI? I think I asked two questions. So yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a loaded one for me because I'm a big fan of Studio Ghibli. I watch it since I was a little girl. I have all of the Totoro like toys
Yes.
now still at my house.
Totoro. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel quite conflicted about this, especially knowing Mr. Miyazaki's like the entire studio, they
Mm,
dedicate decades to create this cozy feel that I think that the entire world is very fond of. That's why it becomes such a big trend, right?
mm,
And I'm not really sure which side of the fence I stand on for this because in all honesty, I'm quite a big beneficiary in this whole dilemma. I
mm,
created my own fair share of
mm.
my dark photos in Studio Ghibli style.
Yes.
And I certainly want this AI trend to continue, but I'm also
Mm,
really scared to lose a big part of this beautiful humanity where people then dedicate their lives to perfect a craft that
mm,
they are doing. And I think a big part of Studio Ghibli is not just the artwork, but it's around like how they craft the stories and how
mm.
they tell it in a way that's like very moving for people. So I think maybe on one hand it is popularizing, well, extra popularizing Studio Ghibli, but
True.
on the other hand, I'm not sure how to protect these artists who really spend decades of their lives in making it better. And now it feels a bit cheapened by AI, but it's
Mm.
really great to have my dog in Studio Ghibli
Yeah,
styles.
true. No, I agree. No, definitely. I think at the end of the
Yeah.
day, if one is profiting, I think there should be some fair of share to all those artists. If,
Yes.
for example, this is being generated by OpenAI, they should
Yeah.
have a agreement of that would be the most sensible thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
But
kind of similar
yeah,
to like Spotify's model where how
yes.
they almost commoditized music. I think back then I know the artist quite well, but
Mm.
even like today, in my playlist, I think from my Spotify Wrapped, I'm like top five artists. I was like, I don't actually know who these people are. I just like their
Mhm.
songs. So I'm not sure if the world will become like that also for like generated art and photography and things like that.
It would make the most sense, I must say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, interesting. So another also controversial topic. So with OpenAI, they essentially mentioned that they would like to train their models with copyright data in the internet because they mentioned that China are doing it if we don't do it. What's your opinion on that statement and the way they're looking in towards training new generation or new models, Gen AI?
I think I feel like the entire I'm trying to not go too much into politics there, but the entire US is in its own like crazy mode right now.
True.
And um it feels that is leaking a little bit into the AI world
Mm,
where there's just so much of political tension that sure, a lot of it is commercial, but I think a big part of it is really political as well.
mm,
And I'm just a really big proponent of just fair competition. And I think if they can use it in a way that is fair and makes sense and are protective of these copyrighted information, more for it. But
Makes sense.
then again, they are big tech, so how much can we trust them?
True. That's true. So another question that I have, and this is probably industry trend. So as you say, ML ops gains traction, and what challenges have you faced in building like expertise in those emerging fields? This could be industries that you never expected developing and facing those challenges. Any industries that you worked on?
Uh, we we work a lot in the financial services industry as Melio,
Nice.
and I think financial services is always the first to adopt new technologies, at least in South Africa. And I think for the rest of the world as well, they just have a lot
True.
of money, right?
True.
And with MLOps, and when we first started, like almost 6 years ago, a whole big part of it is just around education. We keep just pumping content and learning a lot about MLOps and just sharing what we're learning, explaining to enterprise clients why we have to build good MLOps practices and why standardization and reproducibility is important. But
Mm,
only when they really started experiencing the problem, like maybe 2, 3 years ago, there is a little bit of traction. So I
mm,
think before we were almost in a preaching mode of you guys need to worry about MLOps. And then they're like, yeah, 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 well, we hear you. Okay. But not
mm.
really. Until 2 years ago when things started falling over and they have too many data scientists babysitting the model. And they're like, now we hear you. Can you help? So I think we're quite lucky that we invested quite a bit into building the expertise in this area, and it feels like it's paying off a little bit. But
Nice.
what's very interesting, what I'm observing in the past year with the Gen AI application, feels like we're going through that cycle again.
Hmm.
Uh, like 80, 90% of the Gen AI projects, a lot of it still intersects with traditional machine learning and software
Hmm.
engineering. And with the way that a lot of companies are approaching it, it feels like, hey, in maybe 2, 3 years' time, they might come back to knock on our door, like, hey, can you help us with LLM ops or Gen AI ops? And
Mm.
yeah,
True.
I
That's so
think
true.
because they haven't experienced a day-to operational problem with these projects. Right now, we're also spending a lot of our own like time to build expertise and learning around the space of the technical and like commercial challenges of what the enterprises might experience in the future, so that we kind of set ourselves up for when they do come to knock on our door.
Nice. So when you work with your partners, what are the key benefits in terms of, obviously I did ask why choosing you, but do you actually essentially when you work for organization, let's say financial service provider, and you've identified the problems and you develop the solution, do you guys also focus on developing internal stuff where they could reap the most benefits in terms of yeah, developing further solutions and
Yeah, yeah.
collaborating with Malia on
Yeah,
that?
so quite early on at Nilo, we've decided that we want to be a niche boutique almost
Yeah.
consulting company. So we never really wanted to grow our headcount. And to make sure that we stay that way is so that we can transfer our skills and our knowledge to the enterprise clients. So that's almost one thing that we insist on is when we build a solution, it has to be with our clients, not for our clients. So they need to dedicate their own staff so that when we're developing together, at the end of it, it's not like, okay, we're done, leaving, bye. But their team actually gets that knowledge transfer along the way. And
Mm.
our team always has to work very closely with their team because what's the point of building something that no one else can take over and then it just goes back onto a shelf and we're back at that same painful problem we've experienced years ago. So that's
True.
quite a key um, point for us in a lot of our projects.
No, awesome. Now that makes sense. And you're also very involved in that community. So you're part of you organize the Cloud Native Computing Foundation here in Johannesburg. So tell me more about it. What's the foundation all about, and what can we benefit if we participate?
So the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is actually my co-founder's baby. He
Nice.
started it like I think maybe 8 7 8 years ago,
Oh,
way
nice.
before we started Melio. Back then, he was just trying to find someone in his space that are building enterprise grade complicated Kubernetes projects. And it's very difficult to find like-minded people with like hardcore technical like nerdiness. So he started this meetup in an attempt to meet other like-minded people. It's been going 7, 8 years strong. It's actually quite interesting. Tonight we're having an event at one of our partners' office. So yeah, I
About
think the
Kubernetes. Nice.
yes, yeah, about Kubernetes. And the biggest benefits, I think, is just meeting people who are interesting and learning more about what they're working on. A lot of the times I feel like there is a gated mentality of we can't talk about what we're working on because of NDA or like competitiveness or whatever. But I think
True.
if we boil all the way down to like the technical aspects, we can learn so much from each other. And just, I think when we went to like all of the other countries' meetups, there's always super like big community and lots of people even like taking lunchtime to go to these meetup events. And we want to almost build up the Joburg and South Africa's tech ecosystem to also have this type of collaborative. And we just want to learn and have fun vibe together with pizza and beer and whatnot.
Nice. No, that's cool. That's really interesting. I feel like that's something I would like to join. Why not?
Yes, please.
Yeah. And also outside of your work, you enjoy dancing. That's something that we also picked up on the research about you. Yeah. So, how does dance and data science all link together? That's something that I wanted to just bring up.
That was like quite a long time ago.
Oh, I see.
I haven't been doing it for 2 years, but recently I'm like really into running and going to gym.
Oh,
I
nice.
think being a founder, a big part of it is taking your mind off your work and switching your brain off. I think when you're a student, it's quite easy. When you're on a holiday, you finish all your exams, it's done. And maybe when you move into the working world, it becomes harder to separate like your work and life. But being a founder, there is essentially no separation. Your work is almost your life, and it can become quite a like heavy space to be in without creating more like leisure activities for yourself. And I think physical exercise is a really great way to take your mind off things because you have to just, focus on the gains at
Mm.
that moment.
I agree. I definitely
And
agree on that.
yeah.
Because I have ADHD, so if I train, I have a good day. So I normally try to take my dog for a walk, run if he feels like it, then start my day, then go to gym afterwards. It's a good way
Yeah,
to de-stress and from the day as well. Yeah,
definitely.
no, that's interesting. And another question that I also have. So when we look at China, right? They made it mandatory for AI within primary to secondary schools from, I believe, the 1st of September. What advantage would they have compared to the rest of the world? Because I see a lot of schools aren't doing that, and I think it's a trend that Africa or even South Africa should also start looking
Mm.
at that as a key matrix for economic growth, if and also the issues we have in society. So, what's your opinion on that?
I think AI is just becoming part of a normal tool set and a foundational skill that people need to need to have. It almost feels like at least in Asia, there's a really big focus around math and science type of subjects, but
Same.
maybe in South Africa, it's a little bit less. And I think in order to stay competitive, not just like leveraging the skills, but we also need to train up our foundational innovation, well, foundational skills so that we can also innovate on the frontier rather than just becoming an adopter of these like really great technologies. But I know Shopify CEO, I think also was it yesterday or the day before, said that everybody will be measured on like their AI usage and their AI skills from the CEO all the way down. And I think it will definitely become more of a trend that it's kind of like no one puts Microsoft Word on their CV. Well, you shouldn't anymore. and and it feels like being able to ask ChatGPT the right way or prompt the right way would
True.
also become a foundational skill that like prompt engineers survive for what, 3 months, and then they like completely got replaced by everyone is now a prompt engineer.
Yes.
So
True. And there's a lot of no-code tools which allows even someone in high school, primary school, to even build amazing AI applications. That's the fascinating part. But like one thing I always look in like artificial intelligence, like how do we get to a point where it is part of our lives? So in the real world, AI in the real world, we obviously look at real AI towards autonomous cars. That's something that you can consider. But what other stuff can you do in the real world? Would it be robotics or something completely different?
I think it's already part of the real world that maybe the user experience has been good, so we don't really think about it. But it's also like which level of AI, right? Like obviously we're not there at AGI, but there's a ton of normal applications like your social media is just flooded with, well, not flooded, but it's just really, really great machine learning. Uber, like ordering your cars to route it to the right place in the right time, and like being able to talk to Alexa and Google Home. Serious nonsense right now, but I think Gemini is a lot better. So I feel like they are already in real life. And I think maybe even more of the subtle areas in like medicine that we don't really see and interact with every day, of how the doctors and pathologists and radiologists are adopting more AI-assisted diagnosis.
Mm.
And I think it is quite proliferated, and it will almost feel like it's a natural like progression that you don't really feel about it, and you kind of stop talking about, oh, we're using AI, because it's so normal.
True. It's all about what are you doing with it that makes it
Yeah.
more interesting. Yeah, I agree on that. Okay, so yeah, I like the fact that you spoke about, healthcare. That's something that we also worked on. Looking at diagnosis systems that we tried building or we did build. And because one thing we look at in terms of why AI should be implemented in the real world is because of the issues we have in society. And this could go all the way from social issues towards economic issues, towards many other types of issues, gender, there's many things. But when you look at those type of issues, those problems, where would you identify how important would AI be for those issues?
To solve the fundamental society issues like gender
I can give you an
gaps and
example. I'll give you
yeah.
one example. So, in South Africa, we have 1,200 radiologists registered, and I believe it's one radiologist per 100,000. In the public sector, there are cases where, when obviously majority in the private sector, and in the public sector, it's a lot less. So when someone has to go to the hospital from a public hospital point of view, if they want to get do an MRI or CT scan, it can take 3 weeks, sometimes to 6 months, just to get a radiologist to analyze after you've been scanned. And by then, you find that the disease has aggressively progressed to a point that if they picked it up earlier on, that would have probably saved the person's life and cost as well. So those are just some of the examples, if I can just say, from that space. Any
Yeah.
other? Yeah, because I guess that could be a key element utilizing computer vision. But another thing that comes to this is how important is data in general?
Super. I think
It's
if
the
we go
core.
back to like the bias and fairness example,
Yeah.
a lot of the models are not trained with our local data. And even from like pharmaceutical perspective, we know that different races respond differently to different type of treatments because we are genetically different. So
Mm,
if we just blindly adopt like algorithms that developed in a very different environment, different setting, different hospital scans, and like even the different ways of interpreting and how the doctors are trained to respond to like different things. It can make a very big difference, not just really about the quality, but also how close the training data is representative of the target audience or the target cohort that you're trying to treat. So I'm not sure where I was getting to this, but like train our own models. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Perfect. That sounds amazing. And what advice would you give to an entrepreneur trying to start an AI or machine learning company in South Africa? What are the things that you've picked up, advice that you could hopefully help? And yeah.
Do your taxes.
The
I
operations.
Yeah, I think I've heard this quite early on, like a few years ago when I was part of the Grindstone Accelerator, and then they said that for a business to succeed, you need to have everything working right. So that includes people, that includes product, that includes your go-to-market strategy, your finance, your legal, your IP. So it's technology is almost quite a small part in this entire space, especially AI is moving the AI tools and like where the industry is going is moving so fast. Um, to be quite honest, it's quite difficult to build an AI company in South Africa because of the lack of funding. So I think there is not a lot of AI companies funded in South Africa, and there's even less AI companies, like female founded AI companies funded in South Africa. Um, Even the ones that are funded receive a lot of their money from overseas investors rather than South African VCs. So I guess my advice is think hard before you jump in, but the space definitely need more innovators and entrepreneurs so that we can build up the ecosystem more and really retain the talent that we have within the continent rather than, send them abroad to do their postdoc at Oxford and build their startup in the UK. We need to train our own model here.
Yeah, I agree. And if we do get to the stage of training our own model, I think one area is power. Energy is a crisis in South Africa, and now we have a data center with a company called I think it's Cassava, and Nvidia partnered up to develop a AI factory. I'm assuming it's a data
Yeah.
center, and from that point of view, if we can utilize, it's a good platform to deploy, but from a training point of view, do you think it's important for us to pre-train or build models from scratch?
I think it depends on what company you're trying to build and what is your use case. So I feel like to in our context, because we are GPU poor, because we have like fluctuating currency, because we have skills gap, and we have to be quite pragmatic in the things that we do. And we do have a lot of local companies, local AI companies training their own, maybe not LLM, but small language models. And
Yes.
they are doing it in a very pragmatic and a very smart way that targets the use cases that we have, like less compute resources in training and in inference. So I think in that sense, there are companies that's doing it really well. But if you are just trying to adopt something, you really don't need to train your own.
True.
It is more R&D. Then you should only train when you have exhausted all of the other possibilities. Because I think one stat that I heard was this in the early on, this one practitioner, he was spending like quite a few weeks to make to build quite a complicated pipeline to make his application a lot better because of the context window is too small for the LLM. And then the next iteration completely wiped out what he's built for the past couple of weeks because the context window became larger. So what I think is that for companies who are just wanting to leverage AI rather than be the foundational model providers, or like the model itself will become your core competitive advantage, then you should rather aim to build your applications to become better as the language model themselves become better rather than trying to compete. So build it in a way that the next iteration of the model will 10x your application rather than trying to like fine tune or train your own.
Yeah, nah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think even starting just from selecting a model and doing prompt engineering might be the solution. RAG solution could be one of it, or having examples, synthesized data set just to fine tune for a particular use case. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And from a youth point of view, right? So we're in a situation where we see that we need more machine learning engineers, data scientists, AI engineers in the space of, I mean, like you can be in any industry. I think that's the most exciting part. And anyone who's in a particular completely different industry would really benefit if they get AI skills combined with their particular specialized skills they have. So what would be your opinion on youth in terms of their journey with AI? Where should they start if we have a youth who's in university doing computer science for this case, and you find that most universities aren't up to the trend of AI development? What would your advice be?
I think having a very open and curious attitude is always the biggest differentiator for yourself. I think, um, as I said, the space is moving so fast. So whatever you've learned today is going to be outdated in like just a few weeks. I think, like, I don't know, it's quite crazy that we're talking about traditional rag and naive rag. Like, rag was invented last year and it's already called traditional. Now there's like, different type of rags.
Yes.
And what I think is that your fundamental critical analysis skills that you learn at university is still super fundamental. Being able to critically analyze, design, and critique your own work and the AI generated work, I think that is the most important. But in order to become faster at learning, you just have to keep learning lots of different things. And there are like structured courses and certificates that you can do. I was never the person who spend my summer holiday to learn a new language or learn a new course. But I mean, if I could go back,
You would do
I would
that.
probably do that. But then again, yeah, I don't know
You
if
chose that.
anyone listening would do that.
No, I
Yeah.
agree. Because also with high unemployment rates, I think this could also it can differentiate you compared to other people. And knowing that what I've also picked up working in the industry, it's difficult to be with a team where they are used to how things are. And for them to adapt to new technology, even upskilling becomes
Mm,
a hassle because um, you look at business like working for a company as business as usual, but you don't look at it as your actual development for your internal
yeah.
self. So from a person who's been working for 20 years and a youth who's coming in, youth are more likely to pick up on the new trend, how to do things differently compared to what was done before.
Mm,
Would that be the biggest change in terms of employment movements, in terms of having AI, as you mentioned, AI machine learning skills in, or even how to work with LLMs?
mm,
How do you configure your applications?
yeah.
Those are skills that are needed today for many companies. So
Mm.
that will be the biggest differentiator compared to a person working now, not learning those skills, and the person who's learning, they're more likely to take their job.
Definitely. And I think it really is about your attitude rather than your age. We have someone on our team, he's like a very experienced solutions architect, but
Mhm.
he's always playing with new things. And whereas if I
True.
look at some of the client space, these are grads and they have never tried to code with AI assisted coding even in their own like personal time. And I think that creates a much bigger barrier for you to become or to catch up because this
Mm.
thing is moving so fast. And I really think it's just about having that open attitude of trying out new things and not box yourself in, not say, oh, but I've always done things this way.
Mm.
But one phenomenon that we're still debating, like I actually ask everyone who is hiring engineers this question is, do you think it's more likely for companies to hire more senior engineers and make them do more work because now they can do AI assisted coding, they can pump out things faster, or is it more likely for companies to hire junior engineers because they might be able to tackle much harder problems? And I think the jury is still out.
Yeah, and I think experience can be a key. I mean, especially knowing if you worked in an industry for a very long time, that experience can come very valuable. So yeah, I could see that. But anyway, thank you so much. We are pretty much done of our podcast. Are there anything that you'd like to talk about? Now I give you the permission.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, one thing that we spent quite a lot of time building in the past year and that we launched earlier this year is our AI marketplace called Highwind. Essentially, it's a marketplace where we're trying to sell solutions to SMEs, AI solutions that's designed for SMEs. So back then, most of our clients are enterprise clients, and a lot of things that we build requires quite a high degree of expertise and configuration skills that can be quite difficult for SMEs or even startups, even like medium-sized technology business, just because it is quite niche. So what we try to build is package these solutions into a small configurable way so that customers can just like subscribe to these APIs. And there's two flagship products that's currently on the marketplace. One is anything that has to do with document processing, so forms, handwritten or not, digitally captured. We had quite a cool use case with doctors, like handwritten forms, and that accuracy was a lot better than we expected because of the context that LLM has compared to a human around very difficult medical names. So that
Yeah,
was a
true.
cool
Even
project.
OCR, yeah. Even
Yes, yeah.
OCR systems tend to lack a bit, but it's interesting how people are building the solutions. Yeah, I think documents is honestly a very important field. Processing of data, that's key.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other use case that is also quite a flagship is anything that has to do with AI workflow or AI agent type of systems, because
Okay.
we've built a lot of underlying tools that the agents will use. So then we can configure and set up an agent, especially a conversational one, quite easily these days, so that it leverages a lot of document processing functionalities, a lot of the conversational capability, and it can we can like spin one up quite fast instead
Nice.
of someone just like building it from scratch or using an off-the-shelf tool that might not be as customized and scalable as you needed it to be.
So from the marketplace, does it mean that anyone can participate to build solutions and upload onto
Yes,
the marketplace,
yes,
and you get certified in that
that
way?
is
Nice.
that's almost the biggest reason why we started the marketplace is
Yeah.
because of the brain drain problem in the continent, that we
Yeah.
want to enable youths, young practitioners who have really great ideas and have built really good stuff to also be able to benefit directly from their work and create more of a community and economy where their only choice is not go to a corporate or start a company, but they can have a more sustainable way of growing their wealth and building their own portfolio.
Nice. Yeah, that's nice to hear. Okay. Like to you can if you can share that link to me, that would be perfect.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will do
So
so.
thank you so much. This was lovely. I actually enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you enjoyed being part of Jung's AI podcast. We're looking to publish this next week. Yeah, next week will be the date. I will confirm with you. And yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great day. It was really nice meeting you. By the way, I went to a friend's wedding a few months ago, beginning of the year, and I met someone who knew, I believe your co-founder is your husband, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes, yes.
and he's your, I'm not sure, brother-in-law, you can
Oh,
say, or
Jerry.
cousin, Jerry. Yes,
Oh, that's so cool.
yes, that's him. I was sitting next to him at the wedding.
Oh, that's so
Yeah, so
interesting.
yeah,
Small
so
world.
yeah, it's funny, yeah. But yeah, thank you again. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much. And thanks for inviting me to your podcast. and looking forward to hearing it come out or seeing it come out.
Definitely. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye.
you, you too. Bye.